once again so blessed that you have chosen to worship with us on this Sunday morning. Our prayer is that something is spoken, something is sung, something is said, something is read, something happens this Sunday morning that will bless you, encourage you, and give you nourishment for the journey. We invite you to be a part of the Morgan Park United Methodist giving community as well as our worshiping community. At the conclusion of our worship service, we invite you to go to our website where you might contribute to the life of the Morgan Park United Methodist Church electronically. This morning's opening hymn is "Great is Thy Faithfulness." Let us pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks for this time and space and for your Holy Spirit, that Spirit that is with us, has been with us, has kept us all the days of our lives. That Spirit that is present in each of our various locations, gathering and knitting us together and calling us to be the church. Oh, great God, we pray that that Spirit would move and work and have its way. That that Spirit would open hearts and minds to hear you speak afresh into our lives this day. That we will know that we've been in the presence of the living God. And that we will be your agents and your instruments of change and transformation in a world broken and hurting. God, we will give you the glory, the honor, and the praise. We'll lift you up and tell of your wondrous deeds in the midst of the great congregation and beyond. And we offer our prayers in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Let the gathered church say, Amen.
Amen.
morning, church. This morning I have come to proclaim to all and sundry my emancipation. I have come to insist that black folks of the African diaspora join with me in proclaiming their emancipation. I have come to lay down a marker that says we as a people can no longer wait for others to do for us what we must do for ourselves. I have come angry and frustrated. Angry that Congress is once again debating the black problem. I have come because well-intentioned, well-meaning folks of goodwill have once again met without us to figure out what to do about us. I had prepared a well-reasoned and reasonably passionate message about essential and expendable workers until I read this morning's denominational announcement regarding racism. And I just got angry. And I couldn't get it out of my craw. And I can't keep silent. My anger was ignited by my own beloved United Methodist Church. But it's not anger at the church. It's anger at a system that is doing exactly what the system was designed to do. American racism is a system. It doesn't feel, it doesn't think, it just does. I got angry because my church, in a truly ham-handed rollout of another of its initiatives, this time around racism, has gotten itself tangled up in a system that it neither understands nor can control. If slavery is America's original sin, then racism is its enduring legacy. This one is too important to get wrong. It's too important not to worry about the details. The devil lives in the details. It is in the details of the 3, 5, 10 easy steps to fix just about anything that things fall apart. For a bit of context regarding my anger, the internal press release lists Juneteenth as the commemoration of the end of slavery and the kickoff of the initiative. The problem with that is that African Americans have every reason to celebrate the freeing of the slaves in Texas. Cultural appropriation of it, however, for an anti-racism initiative, misses the point that the only reason that Juneteenth even exists is because those same slaves were denied their rightful freedom for 2.5 years. Now, with everything regarding slavery and its ugly progeny racism, the actual story is a bit more convoluted. But here are the facts. On January 1st of 1863, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. 3 million slaves were declared to be then, thenceforth, and forever free, thus ending slavery. But Lincoln realized that while as a war measure he had the power to make it so, legally, the proclamation might have little constitutional authority once the war was over. And so the nation had to wait 2 more years until 1865 for Congress to pass the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, abolishing slavery. Now, for those of you old enough to remember Schoolhouse Rock, you will remember, however, that an amendment to the Constitution requires ratification by 3/4 of the states. On December 2nd, 1865, Alabama became the 27th state to ratify the 13th Amendment, thus giving it the requisite majority of states' approval necessary to make it the law of the land. Alabama, a former Confederate state, was forced to ratify the amendment as a condition of readmission into the Union. Remember, power concedes nothing without a demand.
On December 18th of 1865, the 13th Amendment was officially adopted into the Constitution. Juneteenth, on the other hand, commemorates Union Army General Gordon Granger's reading of federal orders in the city of Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865, proclaiming that all enslaved persons in the state of Texas were now free. Despite the fact that the Emancipation Proclamation had formally freed them almost 2.5 years earlier, and the Civil War had largely ended with the defeat of the Confederate States back in April, they were finally receiving what was already theirs. Juneteenth doesn't mark the end of slavery. It marks the long-delayed deliverance of freedom already granted by the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, somebody out there this Sunday morning is reasonably asking the question, what does this very important history lesson and your very righteous indignation, Brother Pastor, have to do with my Jesus? Let me explain. This morning's lectionary scripture lesson comes from Genesis, the 21st chapter. It reads in this way: the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, playing with her son Isaac. So she said to Abraham, "Cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not inherit along with my son Isaac." The matter was very distressing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, "Don't be distressed because of the boy, because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you. For it is through Isaac that offspring shall be named for you. As for the son of the slave woman, I will make a nation of him also, because he is your offspring." So Abraham rose early, took bread and a skin of water, and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away. She departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she cast the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot. For she said, "Do not let me look on the death of my child." And as she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the boy. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Do not be afraid, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Come, lift up the boy and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make a great nation of him." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy, and he grew up and he lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother got a wife for him from the land of Egypt in Africa. 1600 in Jamestown, Virginia, was not the first time that God's children were enslaved. It was not the first time, nor the last, that God's children were essential, but expendable. Abraham and Sarah had been promised a child years earlier, 25 years earlier to be exact, and they grew tired of waiting, or began to believe that maybe God wasn't able to do what God said God would do. So they came up with their own plan. They'd use a surrogate. Nothing new under the sun. But who? Where could they find a willing woman to hook up with 75 plus 12-year-old Abraham. Hagar will do it. She's a slave. She'll do anything. She doesn't have any rights anyway. No, CBS. Sally Hemings wasn't Thomas Jefferson's lover. You have to have agency to be a lover. But I digress. And so Hagar became Abraham's receptacle and the vessel of Abraham and Sarah's hope for the future. An essential worker until she and her progeny were expendable. Abraham, at the insistence of his wife, took this essential worker, gave her whatever bread and water she could carry, and cast her off. Abraham and Sarah weren't evil. They were simply instruments in the cultural machinery of their time. They did what one does. Policing, as a system, is not evil. Patrolmen, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, the chief, the sheriff, his deputy, and everyone in between are just doing what the system is designed to do. Power cedes nothing without a demand. And waiting for powerful systems to take their foot off the backs of our literal and proverbial necks is a fool's errand. God promised Abraham that even as he abandoned this child of his own loins, this son of his essential but expendable worker, that he would not abandon the boy. God promised Hagar, this essential but expendable worker, that he would not abandon Ishmael. That is a promise that God has made to the essential but expendable throughout time. It is a promise reaffirmed in Jesus when he spends himself with those whom society deems the last and the least. I really wish that God had severely punished Abraham and Sarah for how poorly they had treated Hagar and Ishmael. But God's ways are not my ways. God knew. God knows that the only way to make an awful situation in human endeavor right is to balance the scales and even the playing field. God promised to give Ishmael the same birthright that Isaac received. They would both become great. I believe that Africans in the diaspora have greatness within us. And it is time for us to do the things that only we can do for ourselves. The coronavirus and COVID-19 are no respecters of person. There is no African gene that makes us more or less susceptible to the virus and the possibility of death. That's economics and comorbidities. That's being frontline essential workers until we are expendable. That's health disparities that too often relate to diet and exercise. No, there aren't great hospitals in African American communities. No, too many of us don't have ready access to nutritious food and a healthy environment, but we can't wait for someone else to give us those things. This day, I call on the leaders of Black Lives Matter, the Rainbow Push Coalition, NAACP, the Urban League, and Color of Change to convene public and private, don't hang out your dirty laundry all the time, talks around a model of self-determination and agency for the Black community. We need each other. We need your experience. We need your passion. We need your energy. We need to work together. This day, I call on the African American community not to wait for word that someone else has freed us to enjoy the good things of God's creation. but to cry out in unison, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last. This day I call on well-intentioned, well-meaning folks of goodwill to take your foot, your knee, in a system that is doing exactly what it was designed to do off our literal and proverbial necks. I call on well-intentioned, well-meaning folks of goodwill to stop doing stuff to us without us. This great theologian by the name of Howard Thurman once said, "There's more to us than our plight, our predicament, or need at a particular moment in time. There is no substitute for hard understanding of more and more and more of one another's fact. That is the corrective against doing violence to those for whom we have a sense of caring because of great gaps in your knowledge or your fact. Your knowledge of our fact. I call on well-intentioned, well-meaning folks of goodwill to ask how you may help when invited. And if it seems right to you, to please help. I call on God Almighty to proclaim the emancipation of your people, that no weapon formed against them shall prosper, and to break down every dumb, malignant system that would oppress. I call on God Almighty to do what you did for Hagar and Ishmael, Moses and the Israelites, those who've been last, left out, and left behind, to call out our greatness with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. And in a postscript to my beloved United Methodist Church, you can't legislate an end to prejudice. That only comes from more and more and more knowledge of one another's facts. But you can break down and eliminate systems of racism. Start by appointing good pastors with a colorblind lens, and equalize compensation across churches within conferences, without regard to a local church's financial needs. Radical stuff. Pastors and members will come into more and more and more contact with persons different than themselves. You'll also promote economic empowerment and equality within churches and among clergy. I love you, United Methodist Church. I owe an enormous debt to the United Methodist Church. But the unthinking, unfeeling system is broken, and you can't fix it by tinkering at the margins. I pray God's Spirit upon our church and all of God's creation. So this is that time in our service when we go to God's throne of grace and mercy, knowing that there's a lot that we can and should do for ourselves, but also being convinced that there are some things that only God can do. Heal, save, and deliver. And so I invite you to join with me in a time of prayer. Oh, great God, your eye is on the sparrow, the birds of the air. And so we know, oh great God, that your eye is upon us, that your hand is upon us, that your Spirit is upon us, that we can do better by your power, your grace, and your mercy. And so we come to your throne, O great God,
We are overwhelmed by the coronavirus and the COVID-19 that has taken so many lives in such short order. We are overwhelmed by the violence that we witnessed in our streets. We are overwhelmed, and yet we join with cries of no justice, no peace, no justice. And so, God, we need your hand upon us. We need you to bring healing to our broken and battered bodies. Those who have and continue to suffer with the COVID-19. We need your hand upon those who have lost loved ones to the COVID-19. God, we need your hand upon those who brought health maladies, who had health maladies before the arrival of the coronavirus, and for whom the arrival of the virus just made their treatment and their care more difficult. Heal, save, and deliver. God, we ask that you would be in the midst of our chaotic situation, the places where we now find ourselves. Help us to discern your good and perfect will and your way forward for our lives. Help us, oh God, to eradicate the scourge of racism. Help us never again to treat any of your children as essential but expendable. God, be with those who are sick in body, mind, and spirit. Be with those of us who are anxious and afraid. Be with those of us who are experiencing a minor or a major mental health crisis just in being separated from the ones that we love and care about. Be with those who've lost loved ones. Be with those who've lost their way. And we'll give you the praise. We'll give you the glory and honor. We'll lift you up and tell of your wondrous deeds in the midst of the great congregation and beyond. And we offer our prayers in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Let the gathered church say, Amen. This morning's closing hymn is If It Had Not Been for the Lord on My Side.
Not